IVM.
I have so many credit cards at this point that it can get quite confusing to remember all the numbers and pins and what have you. Luckily, I don't have to remember them anymore because Cred does that for me. On Cred, you can make seamless payments, manage multiple spends and recurring expenses all in one app. Plus, the app also tells you which credit card of yours to use so that you can earn maximum benefits. It's almost like Cred is my personal financial guardian. So, don't miss out. Just download the Cred app now. Folks, welcome to Paisa Paisa, brought to you by Cred, the most rewarding credit card bill payments app. I'm your host Anupam Gupta, B50 on Twitter, and it's always good. It's great to have returning guests on the show. My guest today was with us in July 2019 and Feb 2020. I'm really thrilled. They're completing a hat trick with us. Clear. You will remember them as Clear Tax. Now they're just Clear. Previously, I had Archit Gupta. Now I have with me Preeti Khurana, Director Advocacy and Regulatory at Clear. We're going to give you tons of tips to file your income tax returns. You're also going to catch up with Clear, their story, how they became Clear from Clear Tax, right after this short Cred convenience break.
$100. That's all it takes to begin your journey with Bitcoin and Ethereum. No, really. With CoinSwitch, you can start investing in over 100 cryptocurrencies with just 100 rupees. On top of that, there are zero charges for deposits and withdrawals, so you can trade, buy, sell, however and whenever you want. All of this, plus their extremely intuitive interface, makes CoinSwitch the perfect app for beginners in the crypto space. But don't take my word for it. Just download CoinSwitch for free and try it out for yourself. If you'd like more information on cryptocurrencies, tune into a show about crypto with me, Rohan Joshi, my new adventure on IVM podcasts. CoinSwitch, kuch to badlega.
Preeti, welcome to Paisa Paisa. Thank you so much for doing this for our listeners.
Hi, Anupam. Thanks for having me.
What's been happening at Clear? I mean, when did you guys go from Clear Tax to Clear? We last had you in Feb 2020. It's been, my God, what it's been 10,000 years. Feb 2020, great time, huh? So what's been happening since then at Clear? Tell us.
Yeah, so a lot's been happening here. Firstly, we changed our name, as you said, and that actually reflects what we do now. Like, we were the number one income tax return filing, still are the number one income tax return filing website in the country. But with time, we evolved into something much bigger and much more different. We are now into invoicing, payments, credit. GST is a big part of what we do. So we have like a complete suite of GST compliance products, and e-invoicing has been a game changer for us. So the journey from Clear Tax to Clear actually sort of reflects that evolution, that growth that has happened over the years. And it's an exciting time for us. So yes, principally we are the same. The values are the same. We want to simplify financial lives for Indians, for Indian businesses. But yes, there's a name change there.
Fantastic. We'll probably catch up with you for an episode for GST. I just filed my GST returns yesterday and God knows I have no idea how that works. So today we're going to talk about income tax. So let's start. So Preeti, really long ago, the last date for filing individual income tax returns used to be 31st July. Oh, ek zamana tha, pata nahi where it's gone.
Sure.
These days, I have to ask, okay? I mean, last year, this year, I have to ask people that, bhai, what's the last date for filing a tax return? So let's start from there. For individuals, us, that is people like us, salaried employees, freelancers, consultants, whoever, what is the last date for filing our tax returns for FY21?
So, before I talk about the dates, let me just say there are actually two kinds of dates. So one is your due date, and then there is a last date. So last date means that you can no longer file after that date. And due date is when you must file by that date, otherwise you will attract a penalty for delayed filing. So if you talk about the due date for individuals who are salaried, that is 31st of December 2021. And the last date would be 31st March 2022. So if you don't file by 31st March 2022, you will not be able to file at all unless, of course, you have the tax officer coming to your house and knocking at your door. Then you might get an opportunity to file. But most of us must file by the 31st of December.
I mean, here you're saying that knocking at the door means sending you a mail. I believe it's become faceless now.
Absolutely, yeah.
Oh boy. I think I filed mine by the end of September. I think I was working with some 30th September date, so I've already filed mine and I've done it. So, okay. Again, basic question. Quick answer. Who is liable to file an income tax return, ITR, in India?
Yeah, so that's actually a very good question, because a lot of people they own properties and they've actually may not had any significant income to report in their tax returns, or they sell assets, they have rental income, and they're unsure whether they should report all of this and how they should go about tax filing. So if you are someone, firstly, simple basic rule: if you are someone with a total income exceeding 2.5 lakh rupees in one financial year, then you must file your tax return. And when I talk about that 2.5 lakh number, it actually means that you do not include the effect of exemptions, deductions, all those ATC and your capital gains exemptions. So without considering all of that, if you have a total income exceeding 2.5 lakhs and you're less than 60 years old, because then if you're beyond 60, then your limit increases to 3 lakhs. And those who are more than 80, for them, the limit is 5 lakhs. So all these people must file their tax return. Then coming to, if you have, like we were talking about, if you have a certain income where TDS has been deducted and you want to claim a refund. So even though your total income is not beyond the threshold, but you faced TDS and you want to claim a refund. So the only way you can claim a refund is by filing a tax return. And therefore, you need to do that. Now, if you are someone who's at some point lived abroad, you've had assets abroad, you have some income abroad, and you are a tax resident of India, then also you must have filed a tax return. It's mandatory for anyone who has foreign assets to file their tax returns in India.
So you're saying that, let's say that I've got a FD of 1 lakh on which I get interest of, I don't know, maybe 4%, 5%, and my income from that FD is 5,000 rupees and during the year, and whichever bank or NB or wherever I've taken that FD from, that great bank has cut TDS. Now, in order for me, so my income during the entire year is theoretically only 5,000. It's just one FD. That's it.
Right.
But since they cut TDS on me, I have to file my return. Have I understood that right?
Absolutely. Yeah, but you can prevent that kind of scenario by actually going to the bank before the financial year begins. And they have a form, you can submit that form and you can make a declaration that your total income is not taxable and therefore no TDS should be deducted. But still, if you have TDS and you care about claiming a refund, then yes, the only way to do that is to file your tax return.
Folks, there's your first tip. If you've got a lower level of income which is coming in from wherever, and if someone's said that he's going to cut TDS, then you should submit. It's a form 16H. I mean, sorry, what's the form there?
15G&H.
There you go. So it's form 15G&H. File it with that person and tell him, do not cut my TDS. So let's move forward. Pretty, we are in end November now, and we've got what? Maybe a month to go, right? Let's assume that people actually want to make it by 31st of December, and they've now got a month, which is, I think it's a pretty good time span to get all your finances sorted.
Right.
How should they prepare? Okay, let's do answer A for salaried employees and answer B for people like me, freelancers, consultants, and stuff. So let's start with salaried employees.
Yeah, so it's good to make that bifurcation, because really what kind of documents you will need and how you need to begin depends upon the kind of income you earn. So if you're salaried, then typically you'll have a Form 16 from your employer. And that is actually a pretty good place to begin with. So download your Form 16. Most employers send it over email and you can just sort of download it. And then let me make that plug here. Go to ClearTax and upload that Form 16 and you have your salary income calculated. Besides salary income, if you, like most of us, would have interest income because we keep a bank account. So if you have savings account interest, you have fixed deposit interest, then all of that needs to be included. So therefore, you will need your bank statements. If you do any other kind of activity, for example, you're into mutual funds and you've sold something, or you've sold a capital asset, you've sold a house, or you've had capital gains from selling equity shares or mutual funds, then all of that also needs to be reported and you need a statement from your broker. So that's primarily when you are salaried. Now, if you're a freelancer, then of course the game changes because you're going to be filing an ITR 3, which is actually a business form of tax return, and you will be reporting your receipts. So having a sort of documentation, if you're maintaining accounting records where you're able to trace what all revenue you've had during the year, and you have a track of all your expenses. I hope if you're a freelancer, you are sort of putting together all the receipts, all the expenses that you're eligible to claim, then keep a record of that and then sit with that information, and that's where you can begin.
Okay, and the other option, of course, for people like me, is that you could claim 50% of revenues or declare 50% of your receipts as your income, right? And then you don't have to show the expenses. Have I got that right?
Absolutely. So if you are a professional, in case of professionals, there is a special scheme called the presumptive income scheme where your income is assumed. So if you are within a turnover of 50 lakhs, your total collections during the year are within 50 lakhs, then you have the option for, going for presumptive basis where you file a very simple form of return. And as you very rightly said, don't need to report all the separate expenses. All you do is claim 50% as your expenses, and the remaining is considered your income. And on that income is, your taxes calculated.
There you go, folks. So, Preeti, what are some important documents? You just recapped them in the previous answer, but let's just, I don't know, maybe make a checklist. So, what are some
Sure.
important documents that all of us should keep with us when we are preparing to file our ITRs?
Sure. I think the very basic thing that you require is your Form 26AS. That's the starting point for all of us. So the first thing you should really do is go to the Income Tax Department website and download your Form 26AS. Now spend some time with it, spend an hour or two, see what all entries are appearing in it. You'll see that every single TDS transaction is present there. And now they've recently changed the format. So you'll find other high value transactions if you've done, mutual fund investing, if you've had heavy credit card expenses and you've sold a property, and all of this information will be present in your Form 26AS. So begin from there. And then, based on the type of income you have. So if you're salaried, you should have your Form 16, sit with your bank statements, irrespective of what kind of return you're filing. And if you have rental income, then you need all of those documents. Again, TDS, I'm coming back to Form 26AS because that's a very critical document. Say if you've sold a property, then you'll be able to find the TDS that has been deducted from the payment that has been made to you. So you need to do those capital gains calculations. You'll need documents around purchase price, and again capital gains. You need information around when was that particular mutual fund or equity share purchased, when was it sold. And a simple way to go about this is to use a software which can actually parse your statements. So if you're using Clear, you can come to us, upload your broker statement, and we parse all the information and tell you how much gains or losses you have. So yeah, I think that those documents broadly sort of cover what all you will need to begin with.
You also mentioned, stuff like mutual funds, capital gain statements, stuff like that. So I think a lot of mutual funds today, a lot of these platforms also give you capital gain statements. So you just have to go there and get them.
Sure. Yeah, that's one way to do it. The other way is to have like a consolidated statement. For that you can subscribe to NSDL CAS. So they send like this consolidated account statement, and you can check a few things from there, and you can ensure that you have all the information put together. And otherwise, yes, just upload from any of the other brokerage firms that you're using. Could be a Zerodha, or if you have like a Carby statement or a CAMS, all of that can be uploaded, and you'll be able to pass information quickly.
Amazing. I belong to an era where I had to keep all of this on some Excel file and then give it to my chartered accountant.
All of us actually belong to that era at some point. But recently, so much has happened. And the department has started to ask for so much information. Now you need to do like a line by line reporting. You need to give that code, that is allotted to each fund or an equity share. So it's a lot of work, and you cannot do it manually anymore.
Yeah, but it's a good thing that all mutual funds give you this as a PDF. Just go and figure it out whether you're dealing directly with the mutual fund, then go to the mutual fund website or reach out to them. Just send them a mail saying, hey, I need my capital gain statement.
Sure.
Make sure they will email it to you. Okay. What are the most common mistakes that you see people make when they're filing their ITRs?
Yeah, that's a good point. So the first, I think, is people forget to report certain incomes, or they choose not to. For example, rental income, I think, is the most common one, where you have a certain rental income but you choose not to report it because it may not be facing TDS or whatever is going on with it. And make sure that you're reporting all your incomes. One of the ways to do that is to look at your Form 26AS and make sure wherever you see a TDS, there has to be a corresponding income which needs to be reported. And it's very simple for you to do that, and also for the department to actually identify that you've had certain TDS but there's no corresponding income. So make sure you balance that out. So that's the first mistake. The other one is to actually, a lot of people they forget to claim their deductions. When they are filing their tax return, sometimes, they made a certain investment which they could not disclose to their employer, but they made it within the 31st March timeline. So they're eligible to claim that deduction and they forget about it. So, they come back and they want to revise their tax returns. But largely, if you're using an online platform, you no longer have to worry about, reporting your PAN number, Aadhaar card, and other personal information, because, we make sure that you have the same information pre-filled into your form and you just need to review it. Also, we put certain checks and balances in the income tax department website. So you can be sure that the basic information is accurate. There's a correct IFSC code that is being used. You've reported your bank information correctly. So important to actually just review everything before you click on that submit button. The other thing that I really wanted to point out was reporting your interest income from your savings account. Now, it's a big exercise, even though now most banks will credit either biannually or once a year or whatever they do a credit of your interest on your savings account, but a lot of people don't report it. And what we've been seeing is that, this year especially, the department has been sending out notices if you've not reported, if you have like a zero sitting in your savings account interest. So don't do that. Like, look up your bank statement, and very soon the department may be actually able to pre-populate it for you. So, before that happens, make sure that you look up your bank statement and report.
Let's go deeper in both these, Preeti. First, as a concept, okay, ek zamane mein to, people used to hide income for whatever reasons. Let's not go into that. And today, maybe they're doing it out of genuine ignorance or a genuine mistake. But as a concept, does it even make any sense today to not show your income? Will that actually cause you a problem somewhere down the line?
Yeah, actually, it's a mindset thing. So, when I'm out on the road or when I'm using certain government services, I always have this back of the mind feeling like I'm paying my taxes and, like already taxes are so high and I'm not getting anything. But the onus of filing your tax return and paying your taxes is completely on you. So there's nothing in the law which says that if there's no road in front of your house, then it's okay, don't pay taxes. Yeah, it doesn't really work like that. So yeah, absolutely. So if you have incomes, it's your duty. You're bound by law. So the Income Tax Act, which you're bound by, requires you to report all those incomes. And now with the Income Tax Department getting completely digitized, there's very little scope to do all of this, so you make sure you report all your incomes. In the coming few years, we should be able to see that there are, in fact, there's a tie-up with SEBI, so you may be able to see all your capital gains transactions in your Form 26 AS, or you would perhaps see it pre-populated into your tax return. You will see interest income pre-populated. So a lot of this is happening. A lot of work is happening on that. And yeah, I would highly recommend to just make sure whatever incomes you have, just report it and pay your taxes in, and be on the right side of things.
And what are the most commonly forgotten expenses or investments that we just bhul gaye bas, that we should actually put in that information document that we give to our HR or tax department, whatever, so that they can calculate our last month's tax? So what are the most commonly forgotten investments?
I think a lot of people don't claim their reimbursements properly. So when it comes to submitting bills, if your CTC is structured in a fashion that you're allowed to claim certain bills, then a lot of people they don't have a complete tracking of that. So, and they don't submit by the due date and they keep asking for more time. And they believe, like I've actually had some people ask, can I claim my telephone expenses at the time of filing my tax return? But that's just not possible, because this is something that only your employer can do. Only your employer can give you reimbursements, and based on that, they will deduct tax. So always make time to submit your bills to your employer, whether it is LTA, HRA, reimbursements, broadband expenses, whatever that is. Submit your bills on time. The other is that a lot of times you have a certain ATC deduction eligible and you don't claim it. Especially this time when you have the choice between old and new regime, it's and you opted for the old regime. Then if you've had certain investments, say for example, you have an insurance policy, life insurance, and you want to claim the premium. So try and push your total claim to 1.5 lakhs, which is eligible under ATC. And a host of things are available under that. So if you're someone who's struggling to reach that number, then maybe talk to an expert and discuss and see how you can reach that magical number of 1.5 lakhs. It might still be possible because there are so many eligible expenses. Incomes, yes, a lot of people also forget to report incomes. especially, if you are someone who's had losses also. Losses is also something people don't report. Say, for example, if you have had a loss from futures and options, so people are like, oh, okay, I've had a big loss, let's forget about it. Or if I have capital gains loss, I don't report it. Now this is something that you must report, primarily because you're eligible to set it off from your gains in future years. So super important, both futures and options, please report in your tax return. Capital gains losses, yes, those should also be reported, because in future years, you'll be able to set them off from gains.
Amazing. That's actually a comprehensive list. And if you go to think about it, that list is pretty long, right? I think you can claim school fees for your children also. Is that available for salaried employees, or is it, or it's universal?
That's right. So, it's available for those who are salaried, and for anybody who's paying school fees, you're allowed to claim ATC. So any kind of, freelancers or anybody can actually claim Section ATC. And therefore, if you're paying school fees, then you will be able to claim that under ATC.
Folks, on that note, we're going to take a short credit convenience break. We'll be right back with many more questions for Preeti and many more tips for you to remember when you're going to gather all the information to file your return for this financial year. We'll be right back.
A wise man once said, traveling, it makes you speechless, then turns you into a storyteller.
Well, listen to such travel stories and experiences exploring India on the Musafir Stories with us, Saif and Faiza.
Catch us on the IBM website, app, or wherever you get your podcasts from.
And welcome back to this really special episode of Paisa Vaisa, the Clear Special. My guest, Preeti Khurana, Director, Advocacy and Regulatory at Clear. Okay, Preeti, this second half of our episode now, I want to start it with one thing that I just remembered when you were giving the previous answer. Okay, is there a rough thumb rule or a benchmark for me to figure out whether I'm better off in the new regime or in the old regime, which is basically, should I claim Section ATC and therefore go for a slightly higher tax rate, or should I not claim Section ATC, show my income and claim that slightly lower tax rate? Will you just give a small overview about what this is and how we should be mindful about it?
Right. Yeah, I think, at this time, if you are someone who's very diligent about ensuring that you've exhausted ATC, if you're someone who is able to claim an additional deduction because you do health insurance, if you're someone who makes deposits to NPS, and if you're someone whose CTC is nicely structured in the sense that you're able to claim various types of reimbursements, and you claim HRA, you claim reimbursements like, say, telephone, broadband, books and periodicals and what have you, and you submit all of those bills, then you should definitely opt for the old regime. Because the manner in which you can save taxes via the old regime is actually way much better than the new regime. But if you're someone, who wants to have more money at hand, you don't want to do ATC because you have your own way of saving and investing, and you're not much bothered about, typically whatever is available under ATC. If your salary structure is such that, you have a lot more, so a lot of people have incentive-based income, when they have like 15-day incentive or a quarterly incentive, and they don't have too many reimbursements, and they don't have, they don't claim HRA because they live with their parents, or, they own their house or whatever. So in such a situation, your ability to claim exemptions will be much lesser, and therefore you may benefit from being in the new regime. And especially for the salary, whenever they're going to file their tax return for this financial year, they'll have the option to switch. So irrespective of what you've chosen through the year, at the time of filing your tax return, you can just do a comparison and see where you're better off, and you can make that switch.
And that switch subject to any restrictions, like I can do it only once or twice or thrice, or how does that work?
Yeah, so long as you are salaried and you don't have any income from a business or a profession, then you can, every year you have that option. So, every year you're allowed to switch between the two regimes, whichever is beneficial. But if you're running a business, yes, then there is a restriction. You are allowed a switch only. So once you make that switch, then, it's gone.
Permanently, forever.
Yeah.
Oh man, this is going to. I should talk with my child.
I think there's a 5-year thing, but I get 16 to check.
I think that when I
so once in a lifetime, yeah.
Holy wow. Okay, that's tough. I'll be more careful on this. I think I used the old regime in this return. So, but thank you
Absolutely.
for
I think that should work for a majority of folks, except those who don't care about ATC, who are like, okay, give me as much money in hand as possible and don't make any tax deductions. For them, it's the new regime. But a lot of people, like we did some calculations at various salary levels, and we, so not everyone will be able to claim a complete ATC of 1.5 lakhs. Not everyone will be in that kind of a tax income bracket. But if you're someone with say 12.5, 15 lakhs and above, it makes a lot more sense to be in the old regime. And thereafter, like 30, 40, 50 lakhs, then yeah, of course, definitely the old regime.
Very interesting. Okay, what else is new in the ITR filing for this year? The regime system came, of course, 2 years ago, so it affected us in the previous financial year. But in this financial year, what's new in the ITR filing?
Right. So yeah, this is the first time you're filing your tax return as a choice between the two regimes. That's the first one. The second one is your dividend income. So, if you've had dividend income during the financial year for which you're going to be filing, then you have to report it in your tax return. And because they changed the law, and because of that, now it is taxable in your own hands, in the hands of the shareholders, and the companies don't have to pay the dividend distribution tax. So basically, it's your income fully taxable. A lot of people are asking this question. Do I need to pay like full tax on my dividend income? Yes, you have to. In fact, if you've earned a dividend of more than rupees 5,000 in the financial year, then there's going to be TDS, and you'll locate that in your Form 26AS. So, again, sit with your bank statement, identify which all are dividend incomes, and, collate them together and report it in your tax return. So that's going to take some effort. Yeah, but if your deductor, the company that has paid you, has your PAN number, they've done the TDS stuff, then, you'll be able to easily locate it in your Form 26AS.
Okay. Anything else, or that's more or less it?
Yeah, I think majorly these are the two things you need to be careful.
Folks, that's a very, very important tip for you out there. If you're someone who's getting dividend from equity shares, then please go and match up all the sources and the TDS that's been cut. Okay, because I'll tell you why. FY21 has been a very good year for corporate India, and a lot of big, good companies are increasing their dividends, right? So there's a very good, and remember that the TDS is 10% this year. Okay, last year I think it was 7.5%. This year it's 10%. And if let's say that your actual tax rate at the end of the year is 20% or 22%, well, you've got to fill that gap of 10%. And when that bomb drops on you, it's not going to be good, because you'll be running around to get that much more money. So what Preeti said is very, very important. Okay, keep a track of your dividends. TDS is only 10% if your tax rate is high. Preeti, am I right in that?
Absolutely, you're absolutely right. So last year, sometime in May or June, they changed the rate from 10 to 7.5 because of COVID. But yeah, again, in this financial year, it's back to 10%. So as you very rightly said, if you're in a higher tax bracket, you're paying 20% or 30% tax, then you need to shell out that kind of extra money to pay your taxes on the dividend income. So yeah, makes a lot of sense to actually keep track on an ongoing basis, so that you're paying tax on it and you're able to report it accurately.
Yeah, probably a good idea for you to also keep a basic advanced tax calculation, right, Preeti? Because what happens if you don't pay that in time, then you're going to land up paying interest and then interest on interest. What's that, Section 234?
That's right. Yeah. So there's a 234 ABC, and B and C come into the picture if you're not paying advanced taxes regularly. Dividend income, yes, you can pay the tax when you receive the income. So you don't have to worry about that. Whenever you receive it, from that date onwards, you need to pay tax on it. But yeah, as you rightly said, it goes on accumulating, and so it's calculated on whatever tax you should have paid by a certain date. So make sure that you include it in your tax calculations.
And there's 4% cess. So boom, okay, there's a lot of stuff to calculate. Okay, Preeti, this year, lot of different asset classes, right? They were very hot, and they are still hot, I guess. Crypto, US stocks. How are the gains on them taxed? If crypto, obviously, I really want to know. One, how are they taxed? Two, where do I even show this in my ITR? Is this going to cause any compliance issues or anything?
Sure. Yeah, there's been a lot of interest in cryptocurrencies, and we've been receiving so many queries from investors, especially millennials who've had phenomenal gains in the past year on crypto, and they're concerned about whether they should report, how they should pay tax on it. So frankly, there's not enough clarity from the tax department. There's no rule or regulation which is available right now that we can can refer to. But a simple way to understand whether you need to pay tax on it is to look at the income tax law, which actually says everything is taxable under these 5 heads, except these incomes, these incomes are exempt. So it's not part of the exemption list. And therefore, by virtue of, that all-inclusive law, it's going to be taxable and you'll have to pay tax on it. So when we talk about cryptocurrencies, you have to understand whether, you want to report as a capital asset, which means you've held it for the longer term to benefit from, that kind of holding period, investing period, and then you've had significant gains and you want to pay tax on it. Then comes the question of whether you need to index your cost, what all expenses you can claim, and what is the rate of tax you need to pay, because you have to look at short term or long term. So we've been advising clients that if you're doing crypto income and held it for a period exceeding 3 years, then you pay like 20% tax after indexation. And if it's a shorter term gain, then you pay as per slab rates. But if you've held it, if you had frequent trades, now you're able to hold these wallets on these crypto exchanges where, you put money and you buy coins and you exit them on a very frequent basis, just pretty much like stocks, but you don't see it that way because, there's money coming in and going out very quickly. So if you're doing something like that, then it may be a better idea to report as business. So, and that has a completely another layer of complexities, because when you talk about business, then you're talking about GST applicability, and all of these are still gray areas, but makes a lot of sense for people to actually consult an expert. There are so many who buy and sell and invest and all of that. So it makes sense to actually sit down with your crypto statement and see what all you need to report. And you may perhaps actually have a tax outgo that you could be looking at. So then, we were talking about advanced tax and all of that. So all those complexities will also figure in. So that's about crypto taxes. But when you talk about US income, if you have capital gains in the US, which is also becoming popular as people are investing in the US stock market, and they either have shares or they have other kinds of investing, then you need to report your capital gains. And, one way to do that is to, have a statement of your sale and purchase. And if you've held it for more than 2 years, so basically the simple logic is that stocks which are listed on US exchanges are considered as unlisted, as per the Indian law. So in that sense, you should have held it for more than 2 years, and then you pay tax on it as a long-term gain. Otherwise, you consider it short-term and pay according to your slab rate. So if it's long-term, you go 20%, you get indexation, you get all of that. So that also now attracting a lot of interest, receiving a lot of queries on that, and need to do proper tax calculation and make sure that you're reporting it accurately. Right now, no special sections in tax return forms to report crypto incomes, but US gains, yes, US capital gains, you can report in the capital gains schedule.
There you go, folks. So keep track of all that. Okay, Preeti, winding down the episode, let's talk about tax saving, right? I mean, what are the best ways? Anything new this year, or it's the same old ELSS, life insurance, Mediclaim, etc., etc.? Let's talk about tax saving now.
Yeah, I think gradually with the government making so many changes in the law, and then the choice between regimes and so many investing options opening up. Now a lot of people used to invest in ATC ki bhai, we need to do PPF, yeah, we want to invest in and stuff like that. So yes, primarily the options remain the same, which is the first and foremost that I recommend to people is to sit with your employer and see how you can structure your salary so that you're able to maximize tax benefits, and that includes looking at NPS. Is your employer willing to contribute a part of your CTC to your NPS account? Can you make contributions? Can you make a higher deposit to your EPF so that you're able to earn a certain, fixed kind of return, and you're able to set aside money for the longer term? Then, of course, after you've restructured your salary, then look at exhausting ATC. If you're doing NPS, then you have another 50,000 that you can claim. So that brings your total deductions to 2 lakhs. Then do health insurance, very important in these times. If you've been ignoring, then do your ATD, claim another 20 odd K on that front. And then there are a host of other things that you can do. But primarily, these 3-4 things will actually, help you just sail through.
Okay, and they've closed that small door, that loophole on NPS, right? Which if I'm a high, if I'm someone who has a high salary, the employer, because I remember doing an episode on this almost, 2-3 years ago about how that was actually a pretty good door that was open for you to claim a higher amount as exemption but that was only for NPS. They've closed that door, right?
Absolutely, yeah. So, I'll just track back on that. So what really happened was that they're setting it up in a way that they're able to contribute a large sum to their NPS and to their EPF, right? So there is no restriction on how much you can contribute, how much voluntarily you can contribute to your PF and also NPS. So way back, they had set up a restriction saying that if you're someone who's contributing to NPS, EPF and superannuation, then your employer's contribution, whatever your employer is contributing, cannot exceed 7.5 lakhs in one financial year. So that's one restriction. Then the second one came about in the past budget, where they said that if your contributions to your EPF are exceeding 2.5 lakhs, then you need to pay interest. Your interest on excess contributions will become taxable. So it's captured in two ways. Firstly, your NPS contribution, you can make as per your own choice. When your employer contributes, he's restricted not to a monetary sum, but to 10% of your basic plus DA. Now, the advantage that people took was to really increase their basic salary, right? So if I boost my basic salary, then I do 10% of that and my employer is allowed to contribute that much. But once that 7.5 lakhs barrier came, it means that no matter what your basic is, your employer will not contribute beyond 7.5 lakhs to NPS, EPF, superannuation put together. Then the other thing they did was like a higher basic meant I could contribute higher sums to my EPF. So, once you are doing a higher contribution to EPF, that is also now restricted because, interest on excess contribution will now become taxable.
Amazing. I mean, these guys, every time that we think we are smart and we've discovered a loophole, the IT guys, the government is far ahead, and they should be also in closing all this, right? I mean, there was a time back in, 90s or even till recently where all these, loopholes would be discovered and maybe we would do this, we would do that. But technology and tying together of different sources into one single format, that's really closed a lot of loopholes, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think as Indians, our ingenuity is like commendable, in these matters. But if you look at the tax law, most of it has been built, to capture these kind of instances. So, when we used to study like many years back, maybe more than 20 years back, about the tax law, then, we realized that so much of like what we know today as MAT or whatever came about because, there were these big companies in India who were not paying any taxes. And then if you look at any other kind of law, you'll see that it's happening because there's a certain backdrop to it. So, yeah, I think the tax officer is now getting ahead of us. Yeah.
And you're reminding me of the BEAR Act now, Preeti. I used to love getting into that BEAR Act. And
there's one right here.
Oh, wow. Yeah, this takes me back to my article-shaped days. And of course, I wouldn't want to remember how I cleared my inter and final. But by God, that BEAR Act, reading that BEAR Act was really, it was something
I think should never
meaningful.
Talk about exams. Nobody knows how they cleared this.
Still, and I believe one set of results was recently out. So, guys, if anybody is a chartered accountant out there, newly minted, all the very best. First of all, congratulations to you. All the very best in your careers. And for the majority, who did not clear, if you're listening into this episode, and take it from me, I kind of had a Rahul Dravid when I was doing my CA. Do not lose heart. Okay, please work hard, slog, see where your mistakes are, and whatever, get classes, take some help. Believe me, there's a lot of stuff out there that can help you in clearing your exams. Clearing your exams is possible, right, Preeti? It's not like, it's not that tough, right?
Well, frankly, it is really tough. That's what I figured. And it takes you to be someone to, I don't know, the IITs of the world get talked about so much, but the CAs of the world are, literally slogging it. So there's life beyond CA, definitely. There's lots more these days that you can do, and you have to be your own person. So all I can do is wish people luck. That's it.
And of course, if you're like us, people who actually enjoy reading BEAR Acts and audits, and stuff like that, believe me, there's a lot of depth in the CA course. There is so much.
I think you literally, so true. I mean, you have to be someone who loves reading the BEAR Act, who finds it engaging. Yeah. So I have like this stack of finance acts printed out every year on year, and now I'm just so much of it. So you have to really enjoy it. So if you don't enjoy it, do something else.
For me, it was a Companies Act. I just loved that whole, that entire corporate governance and board procedures that they had out there, and on oppression and mismanagement and stuff like that. I really found it fascinating. So, guys.
Okay, not me. Yeah, I did enjoy those parts. I love my taxes.
Okay, chalo, good to know. Okay, sorry guys. There's just two chartered accountants who are going into a separate direction, but what can we do? Last question, Preeti, for you. Should millennials, right, be thinking about retirement? And if yes, then what's the deal? EPF, NPS?
Yeah, I think that's a very important question and very relevant in today's times when we have millennials who don't want to save for their twilight years. They want more money because they want to buy the latest gadgets and they want to live the life. And nothing wrong with that. But what we are noticing is that a lot of people now contribute bare minimum to their EPF, which is 1,800 rupees a month. It's really small, and EPF is something that you can look at 20 if you're like in your 30s or 20s. Then another 20 years or so, it's going to be like a large corpus that's going to come to your rescue should you get into any situation. So very important to keep up with your EPF contributions. If your employer is doing bare minimum, then perhaps you should consider doing a voluntary contribution, like contributes a little bit extra to that. NPS is an excellent mechanism to actually invest for your retirement years. May not be as tax friendly as EPF, but the returns are phenomenal, and you have much more choice and flexibility to choose. Whether you want to actively pursue how much is invested into equities, or you want to do like an auto choice. You can go up to as much as 70 to 75% into equities, and that will help build your corpus. So in that sense, it's a great way to save for your retirement for a corpus that you may be looking at in 20, 30 years or so, and very, very relevant in today's times, as we are noticing that millennials are paying huge rentals, they're buying the latest gadgets, they're pushing the economy, but at the same time, when they're going to get old, then they will need all these things to fall back.
Let's just do a final recap on the taxation of both of them, Preeti, because it kind of, there was the time when EPF was the best, but then it went into some exempt tax mode, and then NPS has got its own system. So just a very brief overview of taxation of EPF and taxation of NPS, tax benefits. And I think once when it gets taxed in the end, how does that work?
Sure. So we'll begin with EPF. So the first is that your employer has to contribute to your EPF account. That's mandated by law. And you have to make a self-contribution. Now, whatever contribution you make to your EPF, that is allowed under ATC. So it's you can claim it under Section ATC, and it's usually 12% of your basic. If you want, you can go beyond 12%. So you may choose to do like an additional 10K every month or whatever you feel is possible for you. Now, EPF earns usually like a 8.5, that kind of return every year, and it's sort of announced every year what returns will be paid out to the EPF accounts. The interest that you earn on EPF is completely tax-free. You don't pay any tax on it. Whenever you go and withdraw EPF, you don't have to pay any tax. And that's why it's called exempt. When you make a deposit, it's eligible under ATC. Whatever interest income you earn, it's not taxable. And when you make a withdrawal, it's not taxable. Now, of course, there are certain conditions when you make a withdrawal, which means that you should have had 5 years of continuous service, and you give your PAN number, and then you don't face TDS. So largely an exempt corpus, and you have to withdraw within a certain time period after retirement. Otherwise, if there has been a recent case law where if there is interest accumulation even after retirement and you don't withdraw, then you may end up paying certain taxes. So that's on EPF. When we talk about NPS, again, you can do the same mechanism. You can get your employer to contribute to your NPS account, and usually they'll take it off from your CTC itself. So they make a contribution, and you're allowed to claim a deduction in your tax return form. That's ATCCD 2. If you make self-contributions, then you can claim 1.5 lakhs in ATC and another 50,000 under ATCCD 1B. So that's going to take your total deductions to 2 lakhs. And there's no limit on how much you can contribute. So if you want to do more towards NPS, please go ahead and do that. There's no restriction on how much you can contribute to NPS. Now, coming to withdrawal, NPS, firstly, I want to point out that partial withdrawals are allowed. So if there is a situation, for example, here you need to pay for your child's education or marriage, or there's a medical hospitalization or whatever, you're allowed to withdraw from your NPS prematurely. You have to meet those conditions which are laid down, and these incidents are specified. If you do exit at the time of maturity, then 60% of your corpus is exempt from tax. 40% you have to compulsorily annuize. And annuities work just like pension or salary, and they're fully taxable. Annuity returns are pretty low. So that's, I think, something that stops people from going for NPS. But what we're hearing is that there is a lot of reform. So, past few budgets, we've noticed that every year there's something that happens on NPS, and they're really trying to popularize it. And it's actually, if you look at the past numbers in the past, say, 1 year or so, you'll see that NPS is becoming quite popular. So what they want to do right now is to allow you to do SWPs, like systematic withdrawals from your NPS after you exit. So you may not have to essentially do an annuity. You may get a choice there because, they received a lot of queries where people said, we want more choice. We don't want to annuitize that 40%. So there could be a lot more happening on that. But yeah, for now, this is what the tax rules are. And NPS, of course, you can also do a tier 2, which is purely an investing account and there are no withdrawal restrictions. But yeah, when you're looking at your retirement savings, then these two hold a place besides other things that you may want to do as well.
Please do that, folks. Check both the options out. I have both. Okay, I invest in a voluntary PF. I don't have a
me too.
employer to. Yeah, you too. There you go. So I invest in the voluntary provident fund. Who can let go of that 8%, 8.5% sovereign guaranteed interest rate? That's tax free. I mean, it's a no-brainer. And I just love the NPS because it gives me access to among the best equity management at the lowest possible cost, right? I've got a tier 1 and I've got a tier 2. I know that only the tier 1 is eligible for tax, but hey, the tier 2 is also pretty good. So I do it for cost, for the fact that offers a pretty good option outside of mutual funds. So folks, that is it. That's a wrap on this episode. Believe me, this went on for almost an hour, but believe me, this is an area which we can just go on and on. But thank you so much, Preeti Khurana, Director, Advocacy and Regulatory at Clear. Thank you so much for doing this for our listeners.
Thank you so much for having me. Completely enjoyed it.
Thank you. And now the Cred Privilege tip of the week. Folks, if you heard it in the episode, I'm going to repeat it again for you. The last date for filing your income tax returns this year is 31st of December 2021. So get all your documents in place, fill up your form properly, get all the supportings, check with your HR department and listen to this episode all over again for more tips on how to file your income tax return. Folks, that is your Cred Privilege tip of the week. And listeners, if you like this podcast, don't forget to check out other interesting podcasts on the IVM network. You can listen to us on the IVM Podcast app or ivmpodcast.com. You can also follow us on our social media. We are IVM Podcast on Twitter and Instagram. And if you want to reach out to me, I'm your host, Anupam Gupta, B50 on Twitter. Thank you, folks, for listening to Paisa Vaisa, brought to you by Cred, the most rewarding credit card bill payments app.
No material on the show should be considered as financial advice. The material on the show is for informational purposes only. Please consult a financial advisor before taking any investment decision.
Hey everybody, it's been another great week on the IVM Podcast Network. In the kickoff episode of Think Fast, our hosts Varun Dugirala and Suchita Salwan give you their hot takes on all things trending. Whether it's the Paytm IPO fallout, Taylor Swift's re-releases, or the latest season of Shark Tank India, do check it out. On Misconduct, Raghavi and Nisha take us through the story of Santokh bin Jadeja, aka the godmother of Porbandar. At her peak in the 80s and 90s, her gang had over 500 registered criminal cases. Are social networks just content moderating platforms, or are they true blue publishers? Dive deeper into this debate with Siddharth on Smarter with Sid. On Marathi Khidkitun, Dr. Rajiv and Manik Deshmukh talk about differently able people who emerged as achievers. And speaking of Varun Dugirala, this week on Advertising is Dead, he is joined by content creator and gamer myth Path. They discuss his journey as a creator and the experience that came from it. Do follow us on social media. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And remember, if you're enjoying this show or any of our other shows for that matter, please do tell a friend. And finally, do remember that many of our shows are available on YouTube. You can check that out by going to our website, ivmpodcast.com/YouTube, where we have a list of all of our various YouTube channels. Finally, we'd like to thank the sponsors on the network this week: Cred, Bank of Baroda, HDFC Mutual Fund, CoinSwitch, Kuber, Intel, and Oxfam India. Thank you so much for making this possible.
Come learn and experience the ABCDs of being queer with me, Shunetro,
and me, Farhad,
on our show, Gay BCD.
The two of us take you through our stories and experiences of being gay men in the city of Mumbai and have candid
and sometimes downright scandalous
conversations about sexuality, gay culture, and everything in between.
Catch new episodes of Gay BCD every Tuesday on the IVM Podcast website, app, or wherever you get all your podcasts from.